Hi everyone, this presentation is on Adderall and what it might look like to use or to abuse this drug. Adderall is a prescription medication which is used to improve the focus and attention of individuals with ADHD, and it's also prescribed to people that have trouble staying awake. People that might have narcolepsy have been prescribed Adderall because it is a psychostimulant. So because it has this medical application, and also has a great potential for abuse. In the US, it is classified as a Schedule II drug. In order to understand why abusing Adderall is so dangerous, it's important to understand what it's made of. Adderall contains a mixture of two amphetamine salts, D-amphetamine and L-amphetamine, which share the same chemical formula but are mirror images of one another, which allows them to interact differently with the body. D-amphetamine works mainly on receptors in the brain and increases the activity of dopamine and norepinephrine in these areas. And L-amphetamine is a bit more mild and has an influence on the peripheral physical functions of the body, like heart rate, blood pressure, and energy levels. Adderall works in two ways to increase the amount of neurotransmitters available for use in the synapse. So the first way it does this is by forcing the synaptic vesicles containing neurotransmitters to release all of this content into the synaptic cleft. And the next way it affects this area is by hijacking the reuptake transporters, which would normally remove this extra material from the synapse and store it. So instead, it's pumping all of the contents from within the neuron out into the synapse for use. So this is the dopamine and the norepinephrine that we chatted about earlier. Individuals with ADHD might not have enough of the neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine available for use in the prefrontal cortex. So increasing the amount of these neurotransmitters in the synapse ready for use will boost the signals needed to help filter out distractions and improve their focus and attention throughout the day. In order to understand why Adderall is abused, the motivation of users is really important. And there was a very interesting study conducted in 2011 where over a 6-month span, different medical professionals took to Twitter and collected all of the tweets containing the word Adderall. And there were two interesting findings from this. The first was that the primary alternative motive of using this drug was to use it as a study aid. So you saw a lot of words like test, final, college, and of the 213,000 tweets mentioning Adderall, 11% of them mentioned co-ingestion. So a lot of the people who mention the drug are also mentioning words like alcohol, marijuana, or meth, other drugs that you might not always think of when you think of Adderall. And this shows that the drug is used as a party drug, and that presents its own set of risks that we're going to go over. Many studies have been conducted surrounding amphetamines, performance, and energy levels. And one that I found super interesting had to do with taking D-amphetamine, being sleep deprived, and looking at the participants' performance in driving a car. And what they found was, regardless of how much of the D-amphetamine each participant was given, at the same level of sleep deprivation, all participants were equally bad at driving. This is to say that taking Adderall did not improve their cognitive ability or physical ability to drive the car when they were exhausted. The massive takeaway for me from the Swedish simulation study is that consuming a stimulant that you don't need can put you in a really compromised position. The people in this study believed they had the energy to be driving, although it was a simulation environment, not actually on the road. But they were so sleep deprived that regardless of how much of the amphetamine they took, they still could not drive this car. Whether it's studying, partying, or trying to do an everyday task like playing a sport, taking this drug will not make you more successful, and it could put you in an incredibly dangerous position. Aside from this, possession of Adderall in the state of Massachusetts carries a $1,000 fine for first-time offenders, and this only goes up with subsequent possession charges. In addition, selling an Adderall prescription in Massachusetts comes with a heftier fine and potential jail time depending on how much of the substance you intend to distribute. The massive takeaway is this is incredibly risky and there's a very limited potential for reward. On the screen, you can see the label on an Adderall prescription tag, which changed in 2007 to include this warning of the emergence of new psychotic or manic symptoms. So what they were finding is that following a prescription for a stimulant like Adderall, people were developing new onset psychosis. So I looked at a study conducted to estimate hazard ratios in people about my age, so 13 to 25, formative years for your brain and your body, and they looked at the claims databases for insurance companies to assess the number of patients who were prescribed Adderall and then subsequently developed a psychosis disorder and were prescribed antipsychotics. And they excluded so many people from this study. Anyone with prior claims for psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, anything with drugs, drug-induced psychosis, drug abuse, mood disorders, psychotic features, bipolar disorders. So anyone in this study was pretty healthy, mentally stable, and of the 110,900 claims for these stable children, prescribed amphetamines to treat ADHD, there were 237 episodes of psychosis, which is much higher than what the FDA has even stated in this claim. So that's to say from this study, 1 in 469 humans my age, healthy, will develop psychosis from taking Adderall, which is terrifying. My takeaway from the new onset psychosis study is that even if you're prescribed Adderall and you take it as prescribed by a medical professional, there's a great risk associated with this drug and it's incredibly powerful. Buying it on the street and not being under the supervision of a medical professional is incredibly risky because you could develop something like new onset psychosis and not even know it. Now that we've talked about Adderall as sort of a study drug, I want to address it as a party drug and the risks that come with that. So as is, there are serious cardiovascular risks without alcohol when using Adderall, and the FDA lists them all on their website. I'm going to read you a few. Serious structural cardiac abnormalities, cardiomyopathy, heart rate abnormalities, coronary artery disease, or other serious cardiac problems could arise from use of this drug without alcohol. And the issue comes in here because alcohol is a depressant and can lead to massive issues with irregular heartbeat and cardiovascular complications, whereas Adderall is a stimulant and gets your heart rate up. So together, this is a recipe for disaster. Adderall will mask the effects of alcohol's use, and so mixing alcohol with a stimulant makes you less aware of how drunk you're getting and the effects of alcohol's ability to intoxicate you, which can result in an overdose from the Adderall, or it can lead you to get alcohol poisoning because you're not aware of how much you're actually drinking, and either one of those two things alone can lead to death, so this is incredibly serious and should not be taken lightly. Adderall should not be mixed with alcohol. The second risk that comes with using Adderall as a party drug is the mode of consumption you use, and for the sake of this video being for younger individuals that might be on college campuses, I want to talk about snorting Adderall since that is so prevalent. And the risk here is that when you snort Adderall, it's absorbed through the membranes in your nose and goes straight to your brain as opposed to being processed through your organs like your liver and your kidney. That first pass metabolism, which leaves only a limited amount of the drug to be bioavailable for your body's use. Now we have the entire drug being available for use all at once. And with a medication like an extended release Adderall, this can be incredibly dangerous, especially when it's not actually your prescription. If a medical professional screens you, your family's history, you'll know if you're predisposed to psychosis or if you're predisposed to cardiovascular events. But when the entire drug becomes bioavailable at once, these issues can be exacerbated and can lead to very dangerous, often fatal consequences when you're not actually supposed to be taking the drug or consuming it the way you're consuming it. So, this should never go up your nose. Now that we've talked about all the ways to use and abuse Adderall, I want to talk about signs of addiction you might observe. Like with many drugs, it's characterized by needing to get your hands on the drug and use it as much and as long as possible, getting as high as possible, having intense cravings, and just not being able to go about your daily life without the drug. And that's really when you should seek help. For Adderall, mostly there's inpatient care that's available, and there aren't any drugs like Narcan that immediately reverse the effects of the drug. So, clinicians, especially in the case of an overdose, will use sedatives, activated charcoal, and other medications to reverse the effects of the drug. In the case of an overdose, you should always call 911 and you should always stay at the scene. In Massachusetts, you can never get in trouble for calling the police and being at the scene of an overdose. You'll only get in trouble if you leave or if you don't call the police. Thank you so much for watching, and remember not to take drugs that are not prescribed to you.